welcome to This Explainer. Today we're stepping into a story that honestly feels like it belongs in a nightmare, but it started in the very real, very quiet suburbs of New York. We're talking about a place where the walls themselves literally seemed to breathe. We're diving into the Amityville legacy, 28 days of pure darkness. Some houses hold memories, but some houses hold evil. Just take a second to really let that sink in. Today, we're exploring one of America's most terrifying true horror stories. It's a tale that's been whispered around campfires and relentlessly debated by paranormal investigators for decades now. It all starts right here, 112 Ocean Avenue. I want you to picture this peaceful, idyllic neighborhood in Long Island, New York. You know the kind. Children are playing outside, families are smiling, neighbors are waving, and right beside the river stood this large, seemingly beautiful Dutch colonial house. But if you looked closely at its architecture, specifically those strange eye-shaped attic windows, it almost made the house look like it was watching you. Like it was alive. People admired the home from the sidewalk, but no one could possibly imagine the sheer darkness waiting behind those wooden walls. Okay, let's dive into this. That facade of suburban perfection, it completely shattered on the unusually silent night of November 13th, 1974. Inside the house lived the DeFeo family, parents Ronald Sr. and Louise, along with their 5 kids. It was just a normal, quiet night. Until it wasn't.
At exactly 3 a.m., that heavy suburban silence was violently broken. Gunshots exploded through the dark halls of the house. One by one, every single member of the DeFeo family was murdered while they slept in their beds. And here's one of the most unsettling details of the entire crime scene. When the police finally arrived, they found all of the victims lying face down. There were absolutely no signs of a struggle. It was as if something unseen had forced them to stay completely still.
The killer was their very own son, Ronald DeFeo Jr., and his chilling confession to the police: "Voices in the house told me to do it." The authorities were absolutely shocked, and not just by the gruesome nature of the crime, but by the physical impossibility of it all, because the neighbors, they heard absolutely nothing. No screams echoing in the night, no struggle. Only silence. And this brilliantly illustrates the rapid, tragic timeline of the house claiming its next victims. The tragedy of that night left a permanent scar. Yet, incredibly, just 1 year later, a new family moved in. George and Kathleen Lutz believed they'd found their dream home, totally enticed by a surprisingly cheap price tag. Far too cheap, actually. But that dream was destined to mutate into a total nightmare in just 28 days. Before they even moved their kids in, friends practically begged the Litz family not to buy it. They warned them over and over about the gruesome history of what had happened in those exact bedrooms just 12 months prior. But George, he just laughed it off. He confidently declared, "A house can't hurt anyone." It's a statement drenched in terrifying, tragic irony, because, as we'll see, he was so incredibly wrong. The dread started almost immediately. The very first night they spent in the house, a deep, unnatural cold settled over the rooms. And then, a deeply disturbing pattern began. Every single night, George Lutz would suddenly jolt awake in the pitch black. He'd look over at the clock, and it would read exactly 3:15 a.m. That's the exact estimated time that the DeFeo murders had taken place. It wasn't long before the house entirely woke up, and the phenomena escalated with terrifying speed. Heavy, solid doors slammed shut completely on their own. The distinct sound of footsteps echoed up and down the stairs while everyone was in bed. Invisible voices whispered from the dark corners of the rooms. Disgusting green slime oozed straight out of the walls. Windows flew open against the wind, and the family dog relentlessly barked and snarled at completely empty corners of the living room. The sheer, chaotic energy of these supernatural events was completely overwhelming the family. But the phenomena didn't just stay inside the walls. One night, Kathleen's young daughter looked outside her bedroom window into the freezing night, and standing out there in the absolute darkness was a giant figure. It wasn't human. It wasn't an animal. It just had glowing, demonic red eyes, and it was staring right back at her. The child screamed in terror. George grabbed a flashlight and sprinted outside to protect his family, but he found nothing in the dark. Only massive, unidentifiable footprints pressed deep into the snow, leading away from the house. Desperate, terrified, and running out of options, the family called a local priest to come and bless the home, hoping to cleanse whatever evil had taken root. But as the priest bravely walked upstairs to begin the blessing, a booming, disembodied voice ripped through the freezing air of the house, screaming, "Get out!" The priest's attempt at a blessing became a nightmare of its own. First, that disembodied voice commanded him to leave. Then, the room plunged to freezing temperatures. Suddenly, he was violently assaulted, slapped hard across the face by invisible hands, and shortly after he fled the property, strange, unexplained blisters erupted all over his skin. He survived, but he absolutely refused to ever step foot inside that house again. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the haunting wasn't just in the hallways. It was seemingly seeping right into George's mind. Day by day, he transformed. He would sit and stare blankly at walls for hours on end. He started chopping wood obsessively, almost aggressively in the cold. He became intensely angry, prone to violent outbursts. And most terrifying of all, he started speaking out loud to invisible entities in the home. Kathleen Lutz watched the man she loved completely slip away. She later recalled the nightmare, stating, "It felt like the house was changing him." The family was completely isolated in their terror. Because of the constant noises, the freezing cold, and the sheer fear, they had essentially stopped sleeping altogether. Total exhaustion and unending fear had completely consumed them. And then came the final night. The house didn't just creak, it exploded into absolute chaos. Windows slammed open and shut on their own, shattering the glass. Heavy furniture physically dragged itself across the floorboards. The kids were screaming in pure terror as George claimed he actually saw dark, shadowy figures emerging directly from the solid walls. Kathleen said invisible, violent forces were physically grabbing her. The entire house was violently shaking, like it was trying to crush them inside. They couldn't take another second. In the middle of the freezing night, the terrified family ran out the front door. They fled completely barefoot into the snow. They left their clothes, their furniture, everything they owned behind, and they never, ever returned. They had only survived in that dream home for 28 days. So the crucial point is, what really happened during those 28 days? This brings us to the ensuing modern-day mystery. Was the haunting actually real? Did a demonic entity truly drive Ronald DeFeo to murder his family and then try to claim the Letzys next? The story has heavily divided the world ever since. On one side, we have the believers, who look at the horrific accounts, the priest's physical injuries, and the sheer documented terror of the family and conclude that the paranormal phenomena were absolutely real. On the other side, skeptics and investigators have argued for years that the story was an elaborate hoax, invented purely to secure a book deal, money, and international fame. I'll let you look at the source material we've covered today and decide for yourself. But, here's the thing that keeps this mystery alive. Despite the fierce debate, so many strange details remain completely unexplained to this day. Even now, people who visit the area near that silent, waiting house continue to report eerie phenomena. They document sudden, overwhelming feelings of dread. They claim to see shadow figures moving in the periphery. They walk into inexplicable cold spots on warm days. And they record unexplained noises echoing from the property. It leaves us with a lingering chill to end our explainer today. Some stories fade with time, but should some doors never be opened? The Amityville legacy remains one of America's most famous and unsettling true mysteries. And whether you believe it was a demonic haunting or a masterful deception, you might just want to look over your shoulder tonight before you turn out the lights. Thanks for exploring the dark with me today, and keep questioning what's out there.